it. Like, we're all, I'm assuming, neurodivergent folks or people who are, advocating for neurodivergent loved ones in our lives and everything. And, one of the most important things is that we need to embrace being our authentic selves. So with that being said, I'd love to welcome all of you to our very first office hours live virtual Q&A. My name is Veronica. Our guest expert today is Michelle Marie, who is an interview coach, and we're so excited to be answering some of your questions today. I'm going to kick it off by introducing myself for anybody who has not met me. My name is Veronica Yao, and I am the career coach behind Atypical Careers, and I developed this coaching program specifically to help neurodivergent professionals build sustainable work lives and break the neurodivergent employment cycle, which is something that we can all really relate to. Now, I know a lot of you guys have probably found me off of my Facebook group, which is called Neurodivergent Careers and Job Hunting, where we share a lot of these resources here. And I'm so excited to be introducing this new resource, these what I'm hoping to be monthly sessions, so that we can really have these conversations around work life and careers and all of these things, but through a neurodivergent lens, so that we understand, what we're dealing with and what we're up against, and so that we can really get relevant, information as to how to navigate this crazy working world that we live in. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Michelle to introduce herself. Michelle, take it away.
Great, thanks, Veronica. My name is Michelle. My career path has been a maze, and it's been great. Oh, now I have to make a pun about how it's been amazing. Dang, I did not mean to do that. I apologize for my terrible pun to start off the program. I've done a lot of things, and I finally realized that, after 25 years as a professional, mostly in higher education, I have learned a lot about interviewing, and I would love to share that information with other people, so that you don't have to spend 25 years being anxious about interviewing and hating it and never wanting to do it the way I did. And so my mission is to get you out of that, I'm dreading the interview, and move you toward, we make no promises in the coaching world, or we shouldn't, moving you toward, I'm actually kind of looking forward to this opportunity to tell them how fantastic I am and how much I want this job. Even if we don't necessarily want the job, but we know we want a job, we're still going to effectively talk about who we are and why we do what we do. And as part of that process, a lot of what I'm doing with clients and what I hope to be able to do with you here a little bit today is to think about the things that we kind of think that we know about interviewing, or the things that we know, but we haven't thought critically about them, because many of those things are not helpful to us. The ideas like, I need to get the answer right. That is not helpful. It's not helpful. It's not very accurate either, because sure, we can talk about, there are probably wrong things to say in interviews, but in terms of, I'm going to give a wrong answer, we're going to get you toward making an effective answer, because there are any number of right answers, and it's not an exam. We're going to reframe interviews away from, this is an exam, and it's an exam. It's like that worst nightmare. If I'm in an exam and I didn't study, I don't want you to feel like that about interviews, because we're going to reframe them as conversations. And the interview questions are conversation prompts, and we're going to be prepared, because we prepared for the interview. We're going to be prepared with many things to say about ourselves. We're going to say those things effectively, and we're going to be ready to answer whatever we're going to be ready to talk about whatever topic they present to us in the form of a question, because we're also, I joke a lot that my crystal ball is broken today. I can't tell you what they're going to ask you in your interview. I don't know how to do that. It is not possible. And yes, there is value in, the 12 best questions for this kind of job, or the 8 most important questions, blah, blah, blah. Sure, that's fine. That's great. We can use those questions for practice. But if all of those listicles and those articles, if they were working, I don't think you would be here. So,
For
so
sure. That makes sense.
sure. And just again to highlight what I mentioned, like coaching is not about giving you answers. So I want to really set us up. I want to manage our expectations that I'm not going to be able to give you magic answers to anything. I know I'm a real ray of sunshine. You definitely want me at your party. But it is a reality, and I would rather have you have the reality and express it with love and care and support than to pretend that there is some magic answer out there that you that we can find, because where would we look? I don't know. Anyway.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Michelle. We have quite a few questions, and I want to see how many we can get through during this hour here that we have together. So without further ado, why don't we dive into the first one, which is, and a very nice one to start off here. What is your approach to interviewing? So you, Michelle, what is your approach generally to interviewing?
I stepped all over this question in my introduction, didn't I? I am helping. I want you to feel confident about yourself, and I want you to feel like you know who you are, you know why you do the things that you do, and I want you to be able to communicate that effectively. And it's also to as a participant in the conversation that is the interview. If that wasn't clear, if I didn't say that already, I'll say it a few more times probably. And I think, and a lot of it is digging back into your experience bank and making notes maybe about the specific examples, because I think a lot of times, and I was actually just working with a client yesterday who she's got, so like she filled out, she did my Help I Have an Interview mini program, and she filled it out, and she just ate miles of things, just so many examples. And when we were talking, I could see her trying to decide which example to choose. And I was like, okay, here's a suggestion. Pick one. Pick one or two. Pick a few examples, and then stop thinking about the rest of them. And so that's part of my approach, is we're gonna get you ready to talk about the things that you have done, because most of us are not thinking about that in a day-to-day. And so when we get a question in an interview, like, what's the most challenging customer service? What do you do with a challenging customer in customer service? We kind of freeze up, because it's like, well, there were so many, because if we weren't prepared with an example right at the beginning. So
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to kind of build on that, because I know a lot of people who are here today are probably thinking with this question, it's like, what's the right way to approach interviewing? And like there is no right or wrong way, but what we can do is really get to know ourselves as best we can. So the example that I like to give people personally, because, I also deal with interview stuff as well, is, get to know yourself as a professional, as well as, your special interests. And I don't know what your special interest is. Like for me, like, it might be video games, it might be like, my cats or something like that. But like, if you asked me something about, my cats, well, I would be able to talk about that. Any question you shoot at me, I would know the answer. I would feel comfortable talking about it. And the goal is to really get you as comfortable talking about yourself as you are talking about that special interest, about that specialty that you have, that all about. And so I think that's really what we're looking at in terms of preparation. It's not about rehearsing a bunch of answers and trying to anticipate what the employer is going to say, but rather, how can I get to know myself so well that by the time they ask me a question, well, I'm just going to have the answer, because I am so familiar with the content. And I think that's a lot of what you do, isn't that right, Michelle? Because I know that you work with like, information packets, and you like rehearse a lot of like, the stories and like, examples and things like that.
Very much so. Yeah. And figuring out, thinking through ahead of time, I have this list of, in my program, we start with the moments that are most memorable to you, because that gives you that starting point for your stories that you're going to tell about yourselves. And then you also brainstorm a list of the contexts that are appropriate to whatever type of work that you're applying to do. And then we match those up, and we think about, okay, so if I was asked a question about collaboration, which of my stories, which of my packets of information would I then pull out of my pocket and share with them. And being really comfortable with your material is, I learned this lesson in the 8th grade. I was really interested in King Tut's tomb, and because for some reason that had caught my fancy. And I had to give a talk in my, I don't know, literature, art, language arts class. I don't know. 8th grade was a long time ago, but I remember the lesson that I learned, which was, because I was very shy. I mean, to do this, to talk in front of people, like I did not think that was something that I was ever going to be comfortable doing. But I realized, I know what I'm talking about. This is actually kind of fun.
Go.
So I don't know if anyone has lessons from the 8th grade that they still remember that they want to put in the chat, I would find that really delightful.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep the chat live. Like, feel free to chime in if you have thoughts and everything. But meanwhile, I'm going to skip over to our next question, which is, do you have any tips for answering STAR method or any interview questions when you don't have a good memory and these questions require a detailed recall?
Yeah.
So Michelle, take that away.
Yeah, I jumped on that already, didn't I? And I did not plan this, but I'm going to take credit, I guess. So there are a couple of questions in this question. So STAR method. I am agnostic on what method you use to structure the stories you tell about yourselves. But what I don't want you to do is get hung up on, I have to fill in each of the things in the STAR method. So there's a balance there. Use whatever framework makes sense for you. The framework that makes sense to me. I'm a design thinker. I see the world as a series of problems to be solved. Solving a problem is how I enter the world. And so I start with, what's the problem? What was the problem? Who were the people involved? Because usually we need to know who was involved. And then, what was the solution? What did you try? And then what happened? What worked? What didn't work? What did you learn from it? So I guess that's the first part of this question. I would say use STAR if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay if STAR doesn't work for you. You do need to provide all of those things, but you don't need to use that framework. And interview questions when you don't have a good memory. The memory part is harder. Because I don't know enough about what any given person's memory strategies might be. But I do know that when you have something where you need detailed recall, you need that preparation is probably going to be part of that. We've talked about that already a little bit, so I won't recap too much, but definitely having examples. And then there are the Post-it notes. The Post-it notes that you write on, and if it's a video call, you put those Post-it notes around your computer, and then you take a picture and share with us, because who doesn't love a good monitor with its halo of Post-it notes?
Absolutely.
Or you can take a notebook if it's an in-person. You can take a notebook to your meeting, and you can also you can choose that notebook carefully. If you want, and I don't think we have any questions here today about what to wear during an interview, but what you carry is also part of that sort of sartorial, the sartorial choices that you're making and the image that you're projecting, the performance that you're doing, because life is the performance, and we get to choose, what form our notebook comes in. Do we want to take a crappy freebie pen from a previous employer, or do we get one of the really good G6 pens to take with us so that you can have a conversation with the interviewers about how you have about your favorite pen? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm also a big fan of the what I call the humorous drop-in. So as we're preparing for interviews, what are the appropriately humorous? All right, fart jokes are great, but they are probably not an effective choice for in your professional interview, unless you're being interviewed by a bunch of 8-year-olds, in which case go for it. Where was I? Oh, the humorous drop-in might be something like, you might say something like, well, let me, this is my favorite, I don't know, some reference to your favorite pen. Totally makes sense. Tends to fail during anxious social situations. Scripting suggestions. Eileen, give us a little more information about what you mean by scripting suggestions, and we'll see if we
For
can.
sure. And while Eileen is responding to that, I'd like to just chime in and say, you know, I totally understand like the short-term memory thing. It's something that a lot of neurodivergent people struggle with. One of the tips that I like to give for those situations, especially when one of the most common things my clients will say is like, oh my gosh, they'll say the question and then I'll forget what the question is like immediately, like it'll vanish from my brain. One of the things I like to do is bring in a notebook, as you said there, but you know, don't be afraid to like write things down as they're being said. You know, if they're asking you a question, write it down as they're saying it. Take a moment to like sketch out like, you know, okay, these are the notes that I want to hit and stuff like that. And take a moment, just be like, can I have a moment just to collect my thoughts? That is a perfectly acceptable thing to say in an interview. When it comes to trying to remember all of those things, that of course will come with practice, or if you're able to have notes in front of you, if you're able to get that accommodation, for example, or even if you're able to ask for accommodations. I think we're going to answer some questions around accommodations a little bit later, but things like asking for the questions in advance so that you might be able to rehearse them a little bit or something like that. There are things that that can be done. None of them are going to be the typical way that people will do it. They're all going to be, you might get a look, you might get a little bit of a confusion, but that being said, if you're confident in the way that you carry yourself and you're able to show that, yes, I have challenges, but I am also capable of coming up with solutions to make sure that I can overcome them. And all I need to do is like, you know, ask or like figure out how to implement it or something like that. That can also be very impressive to the right employer as well. So don't forget about that. And don't be afraid of going outside of the box just because it's not the typical way of doing something. And Eileen has written that down her answer. So Michelle, I'll turn it back to you if you wanted to answer that.
Yeah, no, and I love, Veronica, what you just said about confidence and knowing yourself, because thinking about what we're doing in an interview, one of the big things that is that can set you apart from the other people who are qualified for the job, who are being interviewed, is the extent to which you know yourself. And that's something we do in my coaching program a little bit too, is the, you know, why the ability to talk about what you're doing at the next level up. So the more abstracting what you're doing, because that demonstrates that meta awareness, that awareness of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so doing that by the thing I like to see it on paper. I'm bad at, so names, like the fact that I can see all of your names makes me 100 times more likely to ever, you know, not in this, not a great example, but if I ask somebody, if I meet somebody and they tell me their name, it just goes right out my brain. But if I ask them how it's spelled, then I can envision it. And then anyway, so I will ask in an interview, I've done this before, you know, just, hey, do you, especially in an in-person interview, do you have an extra copy of the questions handy? It helps me to see things as I'm hearing them. And this only works if it's an in-person and they have, you know, everybody has a spare sheet of that. Like, and that asking, by asking, I'm getting what I need. And I'm also just emphasizing, hey, you know what? I know what works for me and I have the capacity to advocate for that. Yeah, no, Eileen, what you're talking about with the on the spot thing, that's really real. And I think the interviewers know that. I think it's okay to say, you know, I'm not great on the spot, or I don't know, I'm not great at, I would frame that as on the spot is a little challenging, or it's easier for me if, right? To frame it in that more positive, maybe a little more positive way. But that is very real. And I will go back to, yes, the strategies of having notes handy and practice. But yeah, you can totally take down, I think you can absolutely have in your notebook, you can have notes about the things that you want to talk about. So if I was talking about how in a previous role, I managed an entrepreneurship center and we were doing inclusivity and universal design, and we were doing cross campus, like we want to get all students to have access to entrepreneurship. If you asked me what those numbers were for each term and how many students and blah, blah, blah. If I were, I would not be able to tell you. I know they were good. I presented at international conferences about this amazing thing that we did. And I was like, well, we did very basic things. And of course, anyway, I could talk about that in another session if we
For
want.
Sure.
Anyway,
Let's skip ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
My point just being that if I were interviewing for something and I knew that I needed to have that information, I would need that written down. And so I would bring that on a piece of paper with, so those numbers were handy. And I don't think interviewers are, if you present it confidently, I've got those numbers here. I don't think they're going to question that. You know, they're just going to be like, yes, the numbers are there. They did the good work.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Let's skip ahead because I know that we have quite a few questions to get through. I want to try and get through as many as possible. The next question is, how do I know how detailed the interviewer wants me to get with my answers? How do I know if I'm being too overly descriptive? How do I get the right balance? So maybe you could say a few words on that.
And I hear you emphasizing the few words. I love it.
Sorry, Michelle. It's just that I have a lot of questions. I want to make sure everybody.
This is what I like to say is the things that make us great are the things that make us annoying. And here is an example. How detailed the interviewer wants you to get, you have no idea. You have no way of knowing. We're not going to play that game. We're gonna give an answer that is effective because it is succinct, and you have gotten. So when you start talking, you could be talking about anything, and what you need to do is get to the point as soon as possible. And I do this hand motion a lot when I talk about this. And so you're going to get to the point. You're going to take out the extraneous information. You're going to, and this is again practice. You're going to practice this. You're going to prepare this. You're going to have your stories figured out so that you are comfortable with them and confident with them and can deliver them effectively. And the right balance. Right, wrong. Let's talk about an effective balance. You need an effective balance that your audience is following you at every point in the story. And you can find out, you don't need an expert. You could use a thoughtful friend to just tell me if you don't know what I'm talking about at every point in the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to chime in and say, again, really reinforce what you said about it not be let's not focus on getting the right balance. Let's focus on, let's just give them a strong answer. If they want more information, they can ask, can you expand on that? And then you'll be prompted to do it. So don't feel like you need to take on all of the responsibility of giving the perfect answer, because it's also the interviewer's responsibility to try and draw the answers that they want to hear out of you, that they're trying to mine you for information. So if they don't ask those follow-up questions, they're not doing their job. And it's not really your fault if you don't answer those questions. You're not a telepath. So don't put that on yourself. Okay.
The other thing that you can do, and that I do if I am asked a question like that first question that we had that had several questions embedded in it, I will, and especially if I forgot to ask them for a copy of it or whatever, I will say, did I get to everything, or is there more information that would be helpful? And lightly, with a confident but just light, I'm not sure I answered everything you were curious about. You can do that. It's a conversation. If you're in a conversation with someone and you didn't catch a detail, you would circle back and ask them. You can do that with the interviewer too.
Mm-hmm. And I see Stephanie has just posted, and let me just read out really quick her thing. In interview situations, it feels like I am, one, almost punished for being either too quiet for the interview and it's coming off as uninterested when I'm just processing everything deeply, or two, too talkative and it feels like I'm rambling. I've been in organizations before where I've been performing as the bubbly persona and it led to burnout down the road. Tips on navigating, because I want to work in a place that honors my need for the time I need to focus on tasks. Isn't that the dream, right? That's the dream is to be able to be our authentic selves at work without being, punished for just being ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with being too quiet or being too bubbly or too rambly or anything like that. But, there is that structure there and they're expecting you to adhere to it. And anybody who's out of line kind of, they get the eye. So I want to validate what you're feeling, because I see a lot of people dealing with that feeling as well. But that being said, the solution is not to try and find the perfect people. It's about trying to find, it's about trying to become okay with the fact that this is happening, and then finding a way to kind of navigate through it. And, you know, maybe Michelle has some thoughts on this while I kind of collect my thoughts on it as well. But Michelle, did you have anything you wanted to mention about this?
I love that. And Stephanie, yeah, just really like, this is really real. But there are two parts. There's the interview, and then there's the, you know, there's the actual once you're in the job. And I think it might be helpful to separate those and think about the interview as a first date maybe, and you're finding a balance between who you are, and who we are is different in different contexts, right? So who you are as a professional is something that I say a lot, because I am very different. I think I'm not super different. I'm pretty different in a professional context like this than I am in a social setting. I'm actually more animated in a professional context because I know what I'm talking about. In social situations, I don't always know what I'm talking about, or I'm bored because some people are boring. But it's so we're all developing our professional persona, and there's an interview persona also, because in an interview the conversation is structured, and so it's not about, oh, I really like the, you know, let's talk about this, you know, it's a more structured thing. So anyway, so Stephanie, I want to just reflect that you are awesome the way you are, and you get to figure out how you want to do in interviews, like how you want to do that. And there's always a balance. It's that rhetorical triangle that you may remember from writing 121, or maybe they talk about it in high school, I don't remember, where it's that triangle, the interaction between you as the messenger, the audience, and the message. And the rhetorical analysis is figuring out, what does the audience need from me in order to understand the message that I am trying to convey. And that's where we get to choose what we wear. We get to choose a lot of the things. And so the things that we can choose, we can navigate that but in a comfortable way. So I'm not sure. Yeah. It's
I'll just layer on one more thing to say, and that is, you know, everybody masks at work, including neurotypicals. But the problem is that for neurodivergent people, we burn out so much faster and so much quicker because we have to compensate so much more. So our masking is so much heavier, and like, you know, the processor in our computer brain, you know, goes crazy, and then it heats up, and then we burn out, right? So the idea is not to figure out, how can I be 100% my authentic self at work, because nobody can be like that. It's always expected that you're going to behave a certain way. But that being said, how can I balance my authenticity and what their expectations are of me? And how can I set boundaries so that I can make sure that that is so that it's not overtaking my personal needs, but at the same time, like, you know, be able to deliver what is expected of me. I want to address Samuel's mention here. I hope in terms of how much or how little it is to give, it should be okay to ask the interviewer a clarifying question in respect of what exactly they are looking to understand from my answer. This would help me refine my answer and not offer context they don't feel is necessary. I would go out and say, yes, clarifying questions are a great thing to be asking in an interview. You should always feel open to ask clarifying questions. That being said, if you're worried about giving too much information or the wrong information, you can always give, like, you know, just a short answer, a short, succinct answer at first. If they want more information, of course, they can ask you for it, or you can ask, is there anything else you wanted to hear about this? You know, so that is always, you know, an option there. And a good interviewer and a good manager or a good employer will absolutely respect that back and forth there.
Yeah, Samuel, I love your question because it gives me a chance to talk about the value of asking questions. And I take that a step further, because asking exactly what they're looking to get from your answer, especially if you don't quite understand the question or not sure, like, that's great. And can you ask complicating questions that show the interviewer that you know your stuff, that you really have a deep knowledge, and that you know what they're doing. So if you're asked a question about event planning, you could say something like, and if you have a background in event planning, you can ask questions like, I couldn't tell from your website what kind of events that you are doing. And I'm not my example is not always very good, but hang with me. I can't quite tell how big of events you're really doing. Are you doing, or how big is the conference? I see from your website that you're doing a conference every year. About how big is that? And what you're showing there, so that you can then give a more detailed answer, you're showing that you know how to do all of the events. And then, and you also know enough to know that there are lots of different kinds of events. And you can give more specific answers and more specific examples, while also showing, hey, I know what you're doing. I know what I have a sense of your context. And so I think that can really help you stand out. Because another thing about interviews is that once you've got an interview, I want you to be confident. And Veronica, feel free to switch to the next slide if you want, while I'm giving my drop-in story about once you've got the interview, it means you are qualified for the job. They aren't interviewing people that they don't think are qualified to do the job. So getting the interview, I think, is really the win. Getting the interview is the win. And then from there, honestly, sometimes I think employers might as well just roll a dice or, throw a dart at the board, because any one of you could do the job. And so your job as the interviewee is to give them enough information that confirms that you can do the job. Definitely do that. And also, like, setting yourself apart as the top of that pile of people who are qualified. I think that is that's one of my goals for my clients, is to help you give just a little extra.
Absolutely. Let's go on to the next question here, and I'll read it out loud for everybody. I have gaps in my resume. How do I address these gaps and convey that I'm an amazing and hardworking and loyal employee, especially when my nerves are causing me to ramble? And we're back to the ramble topic again, because it's so common. We all do that. And I wonder, Michelle, tell me, tell me your thoughts on this. Where does rambling come from? What do you think is the root cause of that?
I think the root cause of rambling is lack of preparation, because part of what you're doing when you're preparing is you are, and this is from a movie I saw at one point, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the end, I think, is a good thing to practice. And sometimes you can have a little humorous drop in at the end, or you can spice it up a little bit. But I also will say, in this question, it's another 3-part question, the question of gaps in the resume. That is such a salient topic. And I think you will find as many opinions about gaps in the resume as there are people on the internet talking about gaps in the resume. And I think, first of all, you want to figure out what is comfortable for you. It also depends on what the gap is for. But first off, I would say sometimes there's a question of, should I lie and don't lie? That's a real recipe for disaster, because what if you forget what you said, and what if they check? It's just real bad. Not a good idea. But finding a way to talk about it if they ask. There's no reason to bring it up unless they bring it up. Be prepared if they bring it up, but go in with confidence that they don't care. But then to have an answer that is short, that is accurate, that doesn't give more information than you need. If it was anything related to the physical meat sack that we're all walking around in, not sure you need to say more than, I had a health issue and it's been addressed. You don't need to they do not need to know what was going on inside your physical self. If you were caregiving, I think you can say, I've been caregiving, so you can give them some information, but it doesn't have to be a lot. And if you want to share a little more, you can share a little more. Whatever makes sense to you and helps complete the picture that you're presenting of yourself as an employee. And then I think convey that how do I do that and convey that I'm an amazing, hardworking, and loyal employee? I would say that you would go about that by conveying that you're an amazing, hardworking, and loyal employee. You don't have to connect those two. They are unrelated things. And so definitely be working on putting your best self forward, presenting the image that you're trying to present. But you don't have to weigh that down with, oh no, there's a gap in my resume.
I think the only thing I'll add as a former resume writer, well, you know what, I still write resumes, but I did have a resume writing business before I started the career coaching thing. And so this is one of the most common concerns. People are like, how do I cover up the gap in my resume and everything like that? Well, the thing is, everybody, time to time will have a gap on the resume. It's about, part of it is how you present it. And I like to let people know that a resume is not meant to get you the job. The resume is meant to get you the interview. And the only thing the resume needs to do is get them interested enough to pick up the phone and say, I want to learn more about you. If you have some stuff like, you list on your resume that you're very strong and that, there is a gap in there, and they think, wow, this person's perfect, but they have a gap in their resume. Well, maybe I should call them and ask them about it. Suddenly the ball is in your court because you have influence now. You're not just a piece of paper. You are a fully fleshed human being who can actually speak and address those things if they have questions about it. So I always say you don't have to worry about putting absolutely every detail on your resume, because they're not going to be making the hiring decision from that. They're going to be making the decision from when they meet you. So doing that, I also like to say, if you're still self-conscious about the gaps in your resume, I suggest having a highlights of skills section instead of like your most recent experience. Just mention that it's the highlights of your experience, and then put down all the relevant information, and then put a little tag at the bottom that says, if you would like my full work history, please ask, it's available upon request, or link your LinkedIn profile, and that could have your entire work history. So if they really wanted to find it, they could. But the most important thing is to get them to call you back. And so that's really what I have to say about gaps in resumes there.
And I love that you brought in your application materials do not get you jobs. They get you the interview. Nope. That's a super important thing. I'm glad that you brought that up. And then I will also say you're going to get the interview based on what's on your resume and less about what's not. So if there are things that are not on your, in the sense that if they need something that's not on your resume, then you're not going to get the interview anyway. If there's something that they want that's not on your resume, but you're going to get the interview or not based on what is on your resume. I hope that makes sense.
That does make sense. Okay, yeah, for sure. Let's hop on over to the next question here. Come on. How do you answer trick questions? What is your biggest weakness? I know they don't want to know my weaknesses, but what do I say? This is very typical because, for us neurodivergent people, a lot of us are direct speakers. We're very literal. And so these almost feel like, it almost feels cruel to kind of throw these curveballs at us and try and get us to say something that's implied. And so how do we deal with this? How can we prepare for something like this?
Yeah. So trick questions, trick questions are also the category of how many golf balls would fit in a VW Bug, and those are also, I hope no one's still using those. It's total garbage. Do I have a position on that? Biggest weakness, that is another, it's less of a trick question, more of a traditional interview question. And yeah, it's a thing. So there are lots of examples of how the right answer to this question. And I really, really recommend being very skeptical of any, this is the right answer. Any interview hacks are probably good to stay away from, mostly because you're going to end up saying things everyone else is saying, and then you all look like you're not. It's not a good look if you're giving the right answer that you found on the internet, kind of thing. If they're hearing that from everybody else, this is not good. So really, what this is asking, big picture of what this is asking, is how well do you know yourself, and how do you think about yourself? Are you aware of the things that you are still needing to work on? Or are you someone who thinks that you already have everything all figured out? So this is one of the things that I, in my coaching practice, I'm not interested in working with people who are who already think they know everything and who are just looking for the right answers to trick, hacks for the interview, because that doesn't exist and I can't help you. I mean, you're not a good fit for my program or my approach if that's the case. And I don't think that's true of anybody in here, because if you thought you knew everything, you wouldn't have come to the program. But biggest weakness. So really the practical answer on this is to know what areas you are working on. What are the areas that aren't the things that your favorite parts of working? And then have an example of that. Keep it simple. Keep it not, do make sure that it isn't something like, I have trouble completing work. Like that would be a ineffective thing to say as your biggest weakness. But if you struggle with tasks that are repetitive, or if you struggle with whatever it is, you can say the thing that I, struggle with the most is blah, blah, blah. And the way I have found that helps me get past that is to focus on the part of the job that I really like, or to have a, checklist, or to set, give them something that indicates to them that you know yourself, you know how you work, and you know how to work around it, which I have a feeling that in a neurodiverse audience, we're probably pretty good at knowing what we use to get around the things that are difficult for us. And so I would respond to that question. Well, I would do the thing I said earlier about the thing that makes us great is the thing that makes us annoying, and make a little humorous drop in out of it. But definitely, the things that I find challenging are things that are boring. I would not say it quite like that. And the way that I get around that is I would say something other than I wait until the last minute and use panic to motivate.
Yeah. If I had to finish that idea, things that I find, I struggle with things that I find boring, but I have a lot of techniques like that I use to try and improve novelty and stuff like that. And those are things that, I work with with my coaching clients. And also we're always talking about it in the Facebook group community as well, is what are hacks? We're always looking for hacks and ways to try and, boost the dopamine that we don't naturally have and stuff like that. So, really drawing from your own experiences and really trying and shape and really, I'm losing my train of thought, but yes.
I will also say everybody has weaknesses, because a weakness is just the thing that you're not especially good at, and what they are looking for is your ability to acknowledge and make sense of, and and you can even say, like many people I struggle with, or whatever.
There are a lot of ways to soften it and to adjust the delivery of it, for sure.
Yes, delivery is key. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Let's move on. Next up, I have a question here. It says, when should a disability be disclosed? During the interview process or after getting an offer? And that is a very widely debated topic, I think. I see a lot of people with a lot of different opinions on this, but I'd love to take do you have any thoughts on this, Michelle?
Yeah, my thoughts are, first of all, I am not an expert in this particular area, but I will say that my general recommendations for any of this kind of thing is start with what you're comfortable with. Because a lot of people are super comfortable and a lot of people are not. And I think your instinct on that, your personal instinct on that, is something to validate and work with. And then after that, there's the strategic piece. And then Veronica will follow up with some more details on it. But it is all a balance of what's effective and what's authentic for me.
Absolutely. And I think that's really the struggle is like, you know, we want to be our authentic selves, but that also comes with risk because that risks us not getting the job that we want, which, you know, we need to, you know, pay our bills and, you know, feed ourselves and stuff like that. So sometimes it really feels like, you know, like, you know, for neurodivergent folks that we need to sacrifice our authentic selves in order to survive. And that's really what it kind of equates down to. So that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from this question here is like, you know, when should it be disclosed? Because, you know, ultimately we have like that, you know, our livelihoods on the line to a certain degree. I would say that, you know, the benefit of disclosing your disclosing your disability at the beginning is that there's no surprises along the way. You know, you'll know immediately whether or not they're going to accept you or not. The downside is if you are in a position where you really need that income, it might lower your chances of getting it because we don't know if that employer is inclusive or not, and we don't know if that fact is realistically going to take over, like, you know, any other qualifications that you have, because we are living in a world that has bias. So that being said, I think that the nice balance that I found when I was job hunting is I would not mention my diagnosis until I was hired. That way they know I wasn't lying the entire time. I was very honest about my strengths, about my weaknesses, about my capabilities, everything like that. But that being said, you know, they didn't need to have the label of she has ADHD in order to know whether or not I was capable of doing the job. Now, at the end, when I was hired, you know, and, you know, we've gotten to know each other and doing training and everything like that, then I can disclose and be like, by the way, you know, I have ADHD, you know, it presents its own challenges, of course, but, you know, I do know of certain things and supports that I could use in order to make sure that I am able to deliver on everything. And, you know, just by advocating for yourself in that way and showing that, hey, like, you know, yeah, she has challenges, but she also has it under control because she knows herself, you know, that's really, you know, that really makes a difference as well. And that can also make a really good impression on the employer as well. So I don't want you to think of not disclosing at the beginning as being, you know, not honest or dishonest or anything like that, because you're not. You're presenting yourself as you are. You're just not putting the label on it. So I think that would be my thoughts on that.
And Samuel has a great follow-up in the Q&A that popped up for me. It's separate from the messages, apparently. If the work you're applying for includes working with disabled folks, is it beneficial to disclose in the cover letter or interview in relation to how your lived experience can be a benefit in the role? And I think almost certainly, yeah. I think
almost certainly yes. But that being said, I would be mindful to make sure that you can show that you can compensate for any challenges that you have. You know, going through the time to really understand yourself, your strengths, your challenges, how to accommodate for those things, and having that is like one of the biggest tools that you can have when it comes to your work life, because then you can advocate for what you need, and it's not going to be like, you know, I hope that HR can come up with something for me to so that I can succeed in my workplace. Instead, you're going up to them and saying, hey, this is what I need. It would be really great if you could support me. And then all of a sudden you have more autonomy and you have and you are positioned more as like in control, as opposed to somebody who needs like support and a favor or something like that. So those are my thoughts on that.
And I am actually paying attention to the time, which is unlike me. But this would be the time that if you have any burning questions or want to share something about something else, like how now would be the time to put that in the chat if you had a question.
Yes, absolutely. So go ahead. And in the meantime, do you think we have time for one more question, Michelle?
I think there were a couple of really short questions toward the end that I really liked, that maybe we could just kind of blast through.
Let me see here. We had quite a few. here's one that I could actually answer very quickly, because we did cover it a little bit here, but some good accommodations for ADHD to ask for during the interview process. And I think we covered a couple of them with a previous question, you know, but it really comes down to what your individual needs are. You know, one ADHD person is going to have different support needs than another ADHD person, you know. So what I really encourage you to do is really sit down and think about what do you struggle with in an interview setting? What are challenges, and what are some solutions? Like, you know, if you could design your own, like, you know, your own systems, like what would you do? And then try and come up with some of those. And I do recommend, like, if you're not on the Facebook group, definitely post there and get some feedback on what could be good accommodations for you. But, you know, a notebook and writing things down as it goes, like, that could be very helpful. Asking for questions in advance is also a very helpful thing as well. So yes, did you have anything you want to add to that, or did we want to? I think I have a question from Katie in the chat.
Yeah, no, I think Katie's question is really good. I think we've covered this, I think, as much as I have. But then the question on the application, I think that's a really good question. My instinct is that it may or may not have anything to do, it may be a separate HR process than the interviewers are maybe even aware of. So I also believe
that those things usually also have a choice where you do not have to disclose. Like, I choose not to disclose. I would, if you are really unsure about that and you don't want to take the risk, I would just put that, because it's not lying, right? You just prefer not to disclose at this time. So yes.
I think Samuel, I think that's what's happening.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that said, I do want to close this up just so that we're on time here. I know that we had a lot of questions, and I hope that we covered a lot of what we're looking at here. But I just wanted to share with you a little bit more information if you wanted to get in touch with myself or Michelle. We're both, we're both coaches in our own right. Michelle is an incredible interview coach, and she is, I believe, open to clients right now. So, you know, definitely reach out to her if you are interested in improving your skills there. As for me, I am a career coach for neurodivergent professionals. And as I mentioned before, I focus on helping neurodivergent professionals build sustainable work lives and break the cycle of burnout. And I do have a free webinar training online that I can share with you. Actually, I should share with you right now in the chat. But Michelle, do you have anything that you wanted to mention there as well?
Yeah, I'm currently doing thanks for the feedback. It's so nice to hear that things are useful. I'm doing 2 programs right now. I have my signature program, which is what I call the full 5-session interview prep program. And we do a lot of the things that I mentioned. And then I have a mini program that's a 2-session help. I got an interview program, which is it is what I like things to be named what they actually are. I'm not super creative about it, but it's for when you have an interview that's imminent, and so it comes with priority scheduling even, and I'll have spots for the full program opening up, I think maybe starting next week, we'll see, and then the last minute program is open. So you would want to message me, because my website is still in progress to you can't book online quite yet, but I'd be delighted to hear from anybody. Are there any questions? Are there any questions about what it means to work with a coach? Because I think that's something that I think there's some mystique around what it means to work with a coach for these things.
Absolutely. I think we could say like a little bit about what it's like from our ends and see if there's any questions. But I know for me personally, so I became a coach because I wanted to I recognized a long time ago that there was a shortage in career resources for people who were neurodivergent, and a lot of the career resources out there did not really apply to me. And so that's really why I started Atypical Careers. And so when I'm working with my coaching clients, it's really about getting to know their unique situation, and I take them through a course program that I have. But through the one-on-one coaching and the group coaching sessions and whatever, we kind of dig through what your situation is, any mindset blocks, any challenges and things like that. And it's kind of like having a best friend who will tell you exactly what you need to hear. Like, your best friend happens to be an expert in the thing that you don't know a lot about, but you need a lot of support in. And, that person will, be your cheerleader, but also kind of be your reality check person as well. That's at least what I found with my experience with coaches and stuff like that. Michelle, I don't know if you have anything to add or any different experiences on your end, if you have a different style.
Yeah. So the way my programs work is I will send you you start out with, we do a free call at the beginning, 30 minutes, just to make sure we're a good fit. At this point, I think you know a little more about me than I know about you, so you probably have a sense of whether you would want to talk to me 5 times over the course of 5 weeks. But it's a homework and conversation pattern. I try to keep it pretty simple. You get a Google Doc that has homework, and the homework is very much designed to be for you to be as flexible as it can be. So you'll do the parts that are relevant, and if there are parts that don't feel as relevant, you're not getting a grade on the homework. Let's just put it that way. It is definitely you get out of it what you put into it situation. So there are no magic things. It might feel kind of like magic once you realize that I feel like I could talk about myself effectively. Like that might feel magical, but that will be magic that you have created by doing the work. And the writing part of it, you do as much or as little writing as works for you. But we will focus on the saying it out loud with your face part, which that's the part of the homework that I really recommend that you don't skimp on, because I can write all day, let's just write things. Like, that's fine. I mean, I don't do that for fun, but that comes fairly. But in terms of talking about things, practicing is what has given me confidence doing that. So the saying it out loud part. And so then in our one-on-one meetings, because I do everything one-on-one, I think that works. I like that the best. I think it's most effective because you get my full attention. And we will go through the homework together, and we start by talking about what you are most worried about or what's top of mind for you. And then I'll have some things that I saw, because I'll go through what you've written, like in the half hour or hour before our conversation. And then we just rinse and we do that for five times in a row. And by the end, so it's really fun for me, because I get to see your growth. I get to see how your growth between the first session and the end, and I will hear it in your voice. I will see it in your, it will be, it's so super fun for me. So if you have more questions about that, definitely you can unmute and talk about it too, or put it in the comments.
Absolutely. We'll leave the chat open for a few more minutes just to see if anything else rolls in. But otherwise, that was basically the bulk of our presentation there. We hope that you found something useful, even if there's just one thing that you've taken away, like one nugget of wisdom, throw it in the comments or let us know and everything. But otherwise, we'll hang around for the next couple of minutes and see if any other messages come through. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, everybody, for coming. This has been fantastic. Are you through your emotional support tea yet, Michelle?
I ran out of emotional support tea like 5 minutes ago. It almost hung in there with me, but didn't quite. If you turn off the record, that might make it more comfy for folks who want.
Oh yes, I can turn it off now. That's fine.
I think there's a lot of value in